It's been 7 hours and 15 days since I last built the computer. No, wait. It's been 7 years and 15 days. Even though I appear in a video on the YouTube, it doesn't make me a professional computer builder. There are many videos by knowledgeable builders that you probably should watch instead. Yet, here we are. Hello, how are you? In this video I will talk about my latest computer, which I built a while ago. I will go through the different components and my reason for choosing them. As I said in the intro, I'm not an expert and I haven't spent a lot of time on comparing different options. If you're looking for the best bang for the buck, or try to squeeze out the very last FPS from the system, then you're excused. Previously it's always been gaming that motivated an upgrade. However, this time it's video editing. But for most of the parts, I don't think it had any considerable impact on my choices. Also, I've spent a little more money than I would normally do on a computer. Many of the things I'm going to say in this video need to be taken with a pinch of salt. But rather than saying it all the time, I'm just going to put some salt on the table. Let's start with the case. There are many brands to choose from. My previous computer has a Fractal design case and I'm pleased with their build quality. I wanted a fairly small ATX case, so the Define C seemed to make sense. The aesthetics aren't important to me. The computer will be out of sight under the desk. Therefore I didn't choose a transparent case. I don't see any use. Well, maybe if your pet ferret escapes and you want to check if it's inside the computer, then it might be useful. The sides have padding for noise reduction, or at least I think it's for noise reduction. It could be for heat insulation as well. I prioritize quiet before cool. I haven't had any overheating issues with my previous case, the Define R5. No? Too soon? And besides, I live in the northern parts of Sweden, so heat is rarely an issue. I won't go through the specifications, but one thing to consider with a smaller case is the size constraint it imposes on the graphics card. But I'll return to that. The only tweak I've done concerns the power LED. I haven't connected it. It's too bright and too blue. I mean, what's the deal with blue LEDs anyway? When it comes to CPU, it's usually a choice between Intel or AMD. For most of the time I've had AMD. My first AMD CPU was the K62. It wasn't fast, but it was cheap. Just like me. However, on my previous computer I went for an Intel Core i5 CPU, the 4690K. But now with the Ryzen 9 5900X, I return to AMD. It feels like they offer a little more value. Normally I wouldn't spend that much money on a CPU, or any other computer component for that matter. One thing to note is that the CPU does not have an integrated GPU, which means you'll need a graphics card as well. But unless you only do boring office stuff, you will need a graphics card anyway. Do I need a 12-core CPU? Probably not. I mean, most applications do not take advantage of multiple cores. If you're looking for a recommendation, I think the Ryzen 5 5600X or even a 5600G is the sweet spot. If I was on a budget, I wouldn't look beyond the Ryzen 5 CPUs. Although AMD recently announced the AM5 socket, I think AM4 will be a viable option during 2022. Is it better to wait for the latest? Well, that depends on how long you're willing to wait. As I recall, the availability of the current generation Ryzen CPUs wasn't that impressive the first month after the launch. This motherboard supported the 5900X straight out of the box, but that's not always the case. I would recommend getting a motherboard that supports BIOS update without CPU. Otherwise you might first have to get an old CPU and update before you can use your new CPU. Also check the CPU support. Not all AM4 motherboards supports all AM4 CPUs. That's due to the chipset, and it's mainly a problem when using an older motherboard with a new CPU or vice versa. The X570 chipset is the top of the line, but in most cases the B550 is just as good. I think the major difference is the M.2 support. The X570 has one PCI 4 Express slot, whereas the B550 only has a PCI Express 3 slot. With a Gen 3 CPU you will get the PCI Express 4 slot, so unless you really need 2 PCI Express 4 M.2 slots, the B550 is, well, maybe not the better, but at least it's a cheaper choice. And when it comes down to actually choosing a motherboard, it all depends on what features are important to you. For instance, this motherboard has built-in Bluetooth, which I use to connect my DaVinci Resolve speed editor. Here's a pro tip: connect the Wi-Fi antennas, otherwise your life will be miserable. Well, when you use Bluetooth anyway. Of course, you don't have to buy a motherboard with Bluetooth. A USB dongle might actually be a better choice. This motherboard can turn the computer into a ferret discotheque. Thankfully, the LEDs can be turned off. This is the first time I use a water cooler. Previously I've been a little hesitant, but from what I understand the quality is very good and leaks are rare. Air coolers can be quite large and bulky, which might constrain the height of the memory modules. This is not an issue with water coolers. One obvious drawback is potential leakage. A leak might result in a catastrophic failure. Basically it will turn your computer into a fish tank, at least if you have a transparent case. Maybe I should rethink my choice of case. It's preferable to place the radiator at the top of the case. However, a 140mm wide radiator will not fit a Define C case. The maximum width is 120mm. When placed at the front of the case, like mine, it limits the length of the graphics card. With this configuration, the maximum length is 270mm, compared to 335mm without anything mounted at front. So a water cooler might be problematic in a smaller case, but of course it depends on the water cooler and your needs. Well, what can I say? Picking memory was the scariest part of this build. It's a jungle with different speeds, latencies, ranks and what have you not. On MSI's website there is a long list of compatible memory modules. A very long list indeed. But still it felt like I crossed my fingers and hoped for the best. Some of you might argue that a monkey with a dart could have made a better choice. True, but I don't have a monkey, so what can I do? Ultimately it was price and availability that led to this choice. Do I need 64GB? Probably not. I think 32GB will go a long way, so it might be better to get 2 16GB modules instead, and add another 32GB later, if needed. Of course, I have the possibility to upgrade to 128GB. Will I ever need it? Ask me in 5 years. With PCI Express 4 support, it made sense to get the PCI Express 4 NVMe M.2 SSD. According to the box, the read speed is 7000 MB per second. Compared to SATA's 600 MB per second, it's almost 12 times faster. Now, to be fair, on the box it says up to with very small print. But then again, with SATA you rarely get 600 MB per second anyway. I got the 1TB version, which is a fairly large M.2 drive. A smaller, say 250GB, would be sufficient for the operating system and other applications. And maybe a cheaper SATA SSD for additional storage. But it might be a good idea to compare the costs for the different options, especially since the prices can vary quite a lot over time. There's one thing to be aware of though. Most of the M.2 SSDs have the NVMe interface, but if it says SATA, then you shouldn't get it. Obviously you shouldn't get the SATA SSD. Unless it's a really good deal. Check out my affiliate links in the description. And now to perhaps the most interesting part, the graphics card. In my new computer there is a GTX 970 card. Oh, nice. GTX 970. Wait, what? GTX 970, GTX 970. Yes, that's right. I've taken an old graphics card. It's actually the card from my previous computer. Given the prices and availability on graphics card right now, or even the past year for that matter, it was an easy choice. I am not interested in paying a premium price for a budget card. As I said in the beginning, this computer is for video editing, not gaming. Therefore I can get by with an older card, even though a card with more memory would have been nice. But had I been a gamer, I would probably cry myself to sleep every night. Not to say that I don't cry myself to sleep, but that's another video. And thanks to the integrated GPU I can still use my old computer. In fact, I'm using it right now, it's running my teleprompter software. The final component is the power supply unit. To me, that's the most boring part. Here I made it easy. I looked at what was available at my local dealer and simply picked one. It should be modular, that's my only requirement. I prefer a modular PSU on a build like this. It's basically only the motherboard and the graphics card that need power. Overall, Corsair seems to get good reviews. I got the RM850X, the version 2 from 2018. Mainly because the version 3 wasn't available, but also, well, you know me, it was cheaper. I'm not sure what the differences are between the two versions, but parts of the internet says that version 3 is noisier than version 2. Obviously, I choose to believe that. Apparently, it's a common mistake to oversize the PSU. I've measured the power consumption while trying to stress the system by running various benchmarks. The highest wattage I saw was 270 watts. According to the specification, the fan will not start until the power output exceeds 340 watts, which in my case would mean never. In fact, I've never seen the fan run, so it must be true. Or maybe it's broken. Of course, you need an operating system. When it comes to Windows licenses, OEM and retail are perhaps the two most interesting alternatives. The advantage with retail is it's not tied to the hardware, which means it's possible to move the license to another computer. This might be useful if you replace your computer on a regular basis. If there's only a small price difference, I would go for the retail version. Speaking of which, on the Swedish version of the box, there are 3 words. Maybe you can guess the meaning of the first 2 words. Yes, that's right, creativity and productivity. The third word, glädje, means joy. Now, I can think of many emotions when it comes to Windows, however joy is not one of them. But if you find yourself inexplicably joyful, maybe it's because you're using a Windows computer. I haven't done any overclocking, I just can't be arsed with gigahertz and voltage, or whatever one tinkers with. The only overclocking I've done is to enable one of the XMP profiles. It turned out I have forgotten to do that on my old computer. Although I find it a bit strange, you buy memory modules graded to a certain speed, yet it's not enabled by default. Did the manufacturers have that low self-esteem? Or did they know that the motherboard makers usually screw up? I have adjusted the fan curves a bit. Mom, we're out of salt! Sorry. Now all the fans are off, except the CPU cooler when the computer is idle, which makes it quiet. But then again, my hearing isn't what it used to be. It might very well make some noise that I just can't hear. Even though it's been a while since I built a computer, it's not until now I've started to use it. My overall feeling is that it's a bit snappier than my old computer. I guess much thanks to the M.2 SSD. And of course, a lot of internal memory usually helps as well. But the performance of individual applications vary, and that depends mostly on their ability to take advantage of multiple cores. I will do a video where I compare DaVinci Resolve on my old and my new computer. If you're into DaVinci Resolve or enjoy bar charts, you should keep an eye out for that video. That was my thoughts on computer hardware. Feel free to ask questions in the comments below. I probably can't or won't answer them, especially if you point out all the stupid choices I've made. Next time I will get a monkey, I promise. But until then, thank you for watching.